Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Travel Royally podcast. Today, we're very happy to have Roy Leonard from Seaton Carew in northeast England, just south of Newcastle. Seaton Carew is a venerable Old English golf club that was founded in 1874, making it the 10th oldest golf club in England. Roy serves as the club secretary at Seaton Carew, and we'll learn more about his role there, the club itself, and his undying love for Hartlepool United, I hope. So welcome to the podcast, Roy.
Jeff, delighted to be able to join you on this morning. And I'm delighted to say it's actually a beautiful morning here in Seaton Carew at the moment, with the sun shining. And as you'd expect on a links course, just a nice gentle breeze blowing as well.
There you go. So what's the temperature? I'm sorry.
We're actually up to about 14 degrees, which is unbelievable because last night it got down, in fact, yesterday afternoon got down to about 1 degree. So we've had a massive thaw overnight.
So it's warm enough to play today. That's not bad. For Americans, that's around 56, 57 degrees.
Yeah, we've actually got some members out this morning. We are actually just on temporary greens, our winter greens at the moment, purely and simply because when you have such a sudden thaw, it can damage the turf, and so we don't want to damage the plant itself. Therefore, we've just put our members on temporary greens for a short period.
And do you play off mats as well in the winter?
No, we don't. Well, I say we don't. We actually play off mats on the fairways just for 2 or 3 months in the winter. We've decided to do that this year. Once again, we've had really good growth during the summer. We've been very lucky. And so we took one look and said, we really don't want to damage what we've got. We'd prefer to try and keep all that growth ready for the start of the season. And so we've just put our members off mats from the fairways just for 3 months.
Excellent. Excellent. I know my club up in Scotland plays off mats for, I think, the same, probably 3 months as well. I guess everyone does that now, right? I mean, I think it started at St. Andrews, but I think everyone's
That's right. Yeah, I think basically it's very sensible. You know, we spend a lot of time, and our green staff spend a lot of effort making sure that the course is in good condition throughout the summer months. And the last thing we want is to actually undo all of that work during the winter, when obviously you've got no growth. So if you're taking divots, it's not going to start growing back until April, May time.
Yeah. Now, Roy, where are you from originally? Are you from that part of England?
I'm not. No, anybody who comes from England and certainly comes from the northeast will recognise immediately that I don't have a northeast accent. I come from about 50 miles north of London, a little place called Bedford. And I've been lucky enough to be living and working up here before I retired for, probably about 20, 25 years. And I've actually been living in Hartlepool itself for getting on for 20 years now.
Yeah. And how did you come to golf originally?
Oh, gosh. It's a long time ago now. It was actually through a school friend of mine who he and his father played golf. And he said to me one day, have you ever played golf? And I said, oh, no, it's not the sort of game I'd probably play. And he said, well, why don't you come down and have a game? And so I started doing that. And then I never really got into it as such until I got into broadcasting. So I'm a former broadcaster. Whilst I was working, I actually had a golf professional come onto my program to talk a little bit about golf and about taking golf lessons. And I sat chatting to him afterwards and said, do you know what? I think I actually might like to get back into the game. And he said, oh, in that case, why don't you come down and have a few lessons? And it just went from there. And so I haven't stopped playing since then. That's probably about, 35, 40 years now.
Wow, fantastic. Now, you mentioned that you live in Hartlepool and you're a Hartlepool United fan. That's got to be tough at the moment. The last I looked, they were near the bottom of the table.
Yeah, we had a win the other day, but it's still not looking too great. But hopefully we've got the transfer window coming up in January. So I think we're hopeful that we might actually get one or two new signings then and start to turn the corner. But yeah, it's not easy for a Hartlepool fan. I'm kind of I'm one of these people. I won't say I'm an avid fan because I'm not really a football man. I come from a rugby background, but obviously I like to try and follow whatever my local team is, and
Right.
Hartlepool United is my local team at the moment.
Well, my son's a Newcastle fan, and he's very pleased with the changes that have been made since Mike Ashley left.
Yeah, well, I'm not surprised. I mean, I think Eddie Howe is doing a wonderful job there, and my feeling is that he ought to one day become the England manager. But we'll wait and see what happens there. But I'm sure Newcastle wouldn't want to lose him at the moment.
Right, they're playing very well, and we're really happy because we live in Atlanta, and Miguel Almiron came from Atlanta United, our team, and he had a relatively slow start, but this year he's on fire. He scored a bunch of goals and is probably near the top of the charts in terms of goals this year. I know there are a couple that are well ahead of him, but he's in the top 10 in scoring, which is great.
Wow, yeah. I mean, it's amazing how, particularly if you get somebody like a new manager come in, what a difference that can make. And I think, as I say, Eddie Howe has really turned Newcastle around.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Seaton Carew, and I want to tell you something. I mean, you reached out to me to say, "Hey, how come you're not covering Seaton Carew?" And I remember reading about Seaton Carew 25 years ago. I bought a golf book, and this is before the internet, so I was doing research for golf trips, my own golf trips, and I would buy, English golf magazines, and I would buy books. And there was a book that it was 25 years ago that talked about what a wonderful place Seaton Carew was, and it had it up there with a lot of the Great Links courses in England, and so it's always been in the back of my mind. So when you reached out to me, it was very natural for me to want to get you on the podcast. So tell us about your role at Seaton Carew.
Right. Well, I'm the club secretary. I have been for the last couple of years, and I did a little spell for a short while before that as well. But I've been involved in one way or another, kind of on committee, and I've also been bookings manager. I've looked after the club website, probably for between 10 and 12 years now.
Okay.
And I feel so lucky and so honoured to be able to be a part of a club with such a fantastic history. We're just almost 150 years old. In fact, 2 years' time, we celebrate our 150th anniversary. And to be able to play a part in that and to try and take the club forward that step further is just something I feel so fortunate to be able to do. There is only one club that's the 10th oldest in England. There's only one club that's the 5th oldest links in England. And I'm just lucky enough to be a member of it.
That's fantastic. Well, you've got a lot to be proud of at Seaton Carew. Tell us about the club itself.
Right. The club is a members-only club. When I say members-only, it's owned by the members and it's run by a members' committee. So we're not a private club. We don't have a business that's actually running things for us or pumping money into it. So any money that we earn either comes from our members' subscriptions or it comes from visitors' green fees. But it's a well-supported club. We've got just over 700 members. Probably about between 500 and 600 of those are active playing members. And it's a lovely atmosphere. The northeast of England, even though I'm a southerner, the northeast of England is such a welcoming part of the country. The people are so wonderful. And I find that with our membership, we often get emails from people who have come and played here and said, not only was the course fantastic, but the welcome we had was just unbelievable. And that's what we're trying to establish here.
Well, I think that's important because for someone that sends people to play golf in England, that's something we want to make sure that we get. At the end of every trip, we do a survey. And the survey, the first 15 questions are about their experience with the people that we recommended, whether it's a golf course or a hotel or a tour that we offer or what have you. And as an example, our most recent trip that came back, they rated a accommodation property very poorly. And so it does two things. One, it allows us to go back to those vendors and say, I'm going to share with you the survey. You can see how they rated all of the properties and golf courses. You can see that you're the lowest, and they left comments, so you can see why they felt the way that they did. But it also allows us to steer away from going back there because we don't want a bad experience. The big thing we try to do with our groups is provide an amazing, unforgettable experience both on and off the golf course. So we want to set up tours and restaurants and golf courses and, you know, distillery tours and whatever else they might want to do. That's truly an unforgettable experience. So we're glad to hear that visitors get such a warm welcome at Seaton Carew.
I certainly hope that continues.
Yeah. Well, I had it in my notes to ask you this question. You brought it up, but in 2024, you'll be celebrating. The club will be celebrating its 150th anniversary. So, how do you plan to celebrate that? Have you started making plans for how to celebrate that?
Yeah, well, we've actually been working on it now for over a year, probably about 18 months. We started looking as to what sort of things we would want to do. The main thing is that we've actually been given a major amateur tournament by England Golf. Incidentally, it's their centenary year as well. So between England Golf being 100 years old and us being 150 years old, I think it's going to be quite an event and quite a year. But they've asked us to host the English Amateur Championship, which these days is both men and ladies. They both play on the same course on the same days. And so that is quite an event, and we're really looking forward to that. That's their biggest amateur event of the year, and certainly it'll be the biggest event that we've ever hosted. So we've got that. We're also looking at things like a hickory competition, because obviously when our course opens, that's exactly what they were using. And so we'd like some of our current members to experience that and see what it was like and what it's like to try and play the course with the old equipment. You know, some of us struggle even with the new stuff. We've got that. We're looking at all sorts of different things. There are one or two other things in discussion at the moment. But we're just trying to make it a little bit special and a little bit different.
Yeah, I know a lot of clubs have books written about, particularly for the centenary, and I haven't talked with anyone from a golf course that's 150 years old. I think my course is now 130 years old, or close to it. Anyway, but that's exciting for you. The English Amateur that'll be a huge event for you.
It will be. It's 8 days of golf, because there are 2 practice days. We actually, for the first 4 days, so 2 practice days and 2 days of stroke play, we share the event with our neighbours at Hartlepool Golf Club. And then the final 4 days, which is match play, are played purely here at Seaton Carew. So they'll do a practice round at Hartlepool and for half the field, and the other half will have a practice round here, and then they swap over on the next day, and then they do the same for the stroke play, 1 day at Hartlepool for half the field, 1 day at Seaton Carew, and then they make the cut to start on the match play. So it is. It's a big event. I think there's about 220 competitors at the start of it. So it's certainly the biggest thing we've hosted.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, Roy, Seaton Carew is a club that's unfortunately largely unheard of in America. And for those listening, as Roy mentioned, it's the 10th oldest club in England. It's the fifth oldest links club in England. And I think notably, not long before he designed Augusta National, Bobby Jones, Dr. Alistair McKenzie reworked the layout, and it's ranked #1 in Durham at the moment, number 72 in England. So why do you reckon it's not as well known outside of England?
I don't know. I think the problem is geography. You've got the major open courses, the vast majority of which are based in Scotland, and then you've actually got the three down on the west coast, northwest coast of England, and then the two down in Kent. But there is actually nothing in the northeast. Our kind of two nearest courses of what we call a similar standard are Ganton, which is a few miles south of us, probably about 70, 80 miles south of us. And you've also got Goswick, which is about the same distance north of us. But we don't have any near neighbours of a similar sort of standard.
Right.
And that, I think, is the problem. You know, even when the club was originally founded in 1874, it used to actually be called the Durham and Yorkshire Golf Club.
Right.
Purely and simply because there were no other courses in either County Durham or in Yorkshire. And it wasn't until 1887 that the members decided to call it Seaton Carew Golf Club, because by then other golf clubs had come around. For about 13 years, we were just known as the Durham and Yorkshire Golf Club.
Where does the name Seaton and Carew, I keep saying Seaton and Carew, but where does Seaton Carew come from, that name?
You know, I honestly don't know. I mean, the village where we're based is called Seaton Carew. It's a very, very old village. It was, for a long time, a fishing village. And I don't actually know the history. It's a very unusual name, but I don't know exactly what Seaton Carew actually stands for. But it's probably best known these days for a gentleman who took a canoe and faked his disappearance, which some people may well remember.
Yes.
And that's something that the village is actually known for these days, apart from hopefully the golf course.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Now, you mentioned that you've got, did you say 700 members, 600 active?
Yeah, it's about 700 members, and I would say there's probably about 600 who play golf, and you're probably about 500 who are really active members who play on a very regular basis.
And how many visitor rounds do you get a year?
Gosh, off the top of my head, you know, I'm honestly not sure. It's probably not as many as I'd like, but it's enough to make sure that we're reasonably successful financially.
Yeah.
But it is something, obviously, that we're looking to grow. And, you know, we'd be delighted if we could attract one or two visitors from the US, because, you know, the better the name is known, the further afield it's known, then obviously the more golfers that we can attract.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what my experience has been. You know, we have a lot of people, and there's a podcast here in the US called No Laying Up that's very popular, and they call people bag tag berries. These are these people that only want to go to the big name courses, go back to their home club, and they've got Royal Dornoch or Royal St. George's on their bag tag, right? Our experience is that some of the lesser known courses are equally as good, and for whatever reason they may be remote or what have you, but are equally as good and as fun and more welcoming. So a couple of thoughts. This year, we took a group to Scotland. We went to Cullen, which is a little, you know, hardly anyone knows about it. We went to another course called Portrose and Rosemarkie, and everyone loved them. They thought and I was with them, and we played Cullen, and I don't remember having that much fun on a golf course in years. It was so quirky, so unusual. It was just fun. And the other course, Portrose and Rosemarkie, was just amazing. It was beautiful. But I joined a small club, probably not too dissimilar from Seaton Carew, called Murray Golf Club in Lossiemouth, where the RAF base is, and it's an amazing place with very friendly members and so on. So, and I know how important, based on my membership at Murray, I understand how important visitor income can be to the health and vitality of a club like yours.
Yeah. I mean, just as an example, you talk of visitors from the States coming across and playing the big name courses, and also obviously having to pay the big bucks to do so. And I can remember a couple of years ago, I think it was just before COVID, we had a group of 8 guys who had flown into, I think they flew into Glasgow or Edinburgh. And instead of playing the courses that they usually played, they decided to actually play some different ones. And so they went to Southerness, which is just on the Scottish border. They then went down to Silloth, which is down on the west coast, just outside of Carlisle, came across to us, and then went up and played Goswick, which is also just south of the Scottish border. None of them are kind of what I would call as recognised courses. They're not on that sort of rota that you normally have. And they're not the same sort of price. I think the most expensive one of the 4 was probably about 80 pounds, which is probably about $100, maybe not even that. And these guys were blown away. They just said, we're playing 4 courses, which are absolutely superb, all links courses, and they're as good as the courses that we're playing and paying £250 for.
Right.
And I think that's what we're trying to establish at the moment. We're actually working quite closely with the 4 courses, the other 3 courses I mentioned, so Goswick, Silloth, and Southerness, because we're all in that similar sort of position where we're not that well known outside of the UK, but we're all absolutely stunning courses and well worth a visit.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I played Southerness and Silloth on Solway, and I've even played Goswick, right? So you're the only one of the 4 that I haven't played. I'm assuming there's an invitation looming soon for me to come by and play. But you're right. I played them. Go ahead.
I was going to say, how could I refuse? I mean, yeah, of course you're welcome. We'd love to see you here.
And you'll buy me a pint at the end? Is that?
Oh, I think might even do that.
Maybe I should buy you a pint for the round of golf. But seriously, what we did was we were staying in a little town called Moffat, which is in the middle of nowhere in Scotland, and we went down and played. We played Southerness, and then we played Silloth, and then on a different trip we were staying outside of Edinburgh, and we came down and played Goswick, and that was fun. That was a great deal of fun. And you're absolutely right. You must be literally due east of Silloth, very close to that.
Yeah, I would imagine if you drew a line across, then they probably wouldn't be either much further north or much further south of us. But we're just on opposite coasts.
Yeah. Well, I love those other 3, so I'm certain that I would love playing at Seaton Carew as well.
Well, you must put it on your bucket list. So.
It's on there. There are a handful. There are only a handful of courses that I truly need to play in my mind in England. I've played a lot of golf in England. One that I want to play is Royal West Norfolk. And then I haven't played those courses down in Cornwall and Devon. So I haven't played St. Enodoc or Westward Ho or Saunton or Trevose or those, but those are all on the list. And truly, Seaton Carew's on that list. So they're not, hey, I'd like to. Those are must plays for me because I want to experience all of those. So,
yeah, well, I was lucky enough a long time ago, in fact, fairly early on when I got back into golf, to actually play Trevose and be a member at Trevose. And that's another lovely course, and certainly well worth a visit if you're down in that part of England.
Yeah. Well, that's another place. I mean, that's a very hard place to get to as well.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, when you think about, playing those courses that you mentioned in Kent, like Royal St. George's, Littlestone, Prince's, Royal Cinque Ports, you can easily fly into London and get there in 90 minutes or 2 hours. Up on the Northwest, if you're going to play in Merseyside and Lancashire, you just fly into Manchester, and within an hour you're at those courses, or close to it anyway. But to get where you are, it's more of a journey.
That's the problem.
Well, worth the journey, but it's a journey nonetheless, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think there are that many international flights between the States and Newcastle, which is probably the nearest big airport to us. We've obviously got Durham Tees Valley, but they tend to just be more short haul European stuff.
Right.
So yeah, if you're going to come across, it would probably be a trip into Manchester, and then get a little mini coach and come and do the circuit, as they say.
Right. Exactly. So I want to talk about the course itself, and I'm actually intrigued by the fact that you have 22 holes that allow for 4 different layouts. Tell us about that. How does that work?
Yeah, it's a quirk of fate in many ways. We actually own land on which our main 18, we own land on which 14 of our main holes were based. And the other 4 holes, the very far 4 holes, were on land that we actually rent from a business called PD Ports, which is based on the River Tees. And I think it was about 1974, 1975, they came to the club and said, look, we're thinking of developing this piece of land. How does that affect you? And the members went, no, looked around and realized that actually over time, we'd actually had more dunes added to the east of us. And so they were able to go to Frank Penning, course architect, and say to him, could you actually put 4 new holes in the dunes? Which he duly did. And then, lo and behold, PD Ports came back to us and said, actually, we've changed our minds. So we ended up with 22 holes, and it was kind of, well, what do we do with 22 holes? And so they then started looking, and not long after that, we got the Brabazon Trophy here, which is one of the big amateur events. And so they decided to look and see if they could make a course for that, and that became known as the Brabazon course, the Brabazon layout.
Yeah.
And then shortly after that, we had the boys' championship here, and a gentleman called Gerard Micklem, I think he was president of the England Golf Union at that time. He came down, had a look, and said, well, I think the Brabazon is a bit too tough and a bit too long for the boys. Can we kind of jiggle around a bit and find some holes that we can put them on? And so he came up with a course which is now known as the Micklem course. So we've kind of limited it down now to about 3. So we now play the old course, which is the original Mackenzie layout. We play the Brabazon, which is the one that was played for the Brabazon Trophy, and then we play the Micklem, which was for the Boys International. They're all cracking courses. Obviously, the main 18 is the Mackenzie layout, the old course, but then you've got, for the Micklem, you've got 15 of the Mackenzie holes and 3 of the Penning holes. And then for the Brabazon, you've got 14 Mackenzie and the 4 Pennings. So it's a nice variety, but they've all got stunning holes on them. And personally, my favorite is the Micklem. I just think it is a really tough back 9. It's a cracking back 9, and we now tend to hold a lot of our events on that. And
but do you rotate? Like, if let's say that the members show up on Saturday, they say, does the pro say, hey, today we're playing the Micklem or the Brabazon or the other?
Yeah, we used to, but now we're actually starting to limit it a bit more. So now we're tending to play the Micklem in the summer and the Old Course in the winter. Partly the reason for that is because the course is so old, we've actually got a couple of public rights of way running across it. And there is a very nice beach at Seaton Carew that people walk across to. And that crosses two of the holes on the old course. And so in the summer, it can get quite tedious when you're stood there waiting to play a shot and you've got people with buckets and spades and fishing rods and that going across to the beach. So we try not to play that in the summer now. We actually tend to stick to the Micklem where the holes don't actually cross the public rights of way. So it tends to now be 6 months on one, 6 months on the other, and we just keep the Brabazon back as a kind of almost like a spare in case we need to alternate holes for maintenance or whatever.
Yeah. Well, you've got my mouth watering. I can just imagine playing there in the summertime. I can't wait to play there. But tell us about the hole behind me. This looks like a devious green complex. It reminds me of, I don't know if you're a skier, but in the U.S. they give kind of dastardly names to the difficult ski runs, like the Devil's Pulpit or something like that. This looks like, Hell's Fury might be the name of this hole, the way I look at it, with all those bunkers.
Right. Well, it's actually known as Doctor. And that's not because you need a doctor after you've played it, although you probably would do. It's named after our founder, who was Dr. Duncan McQuaig, who was a doctor who came from Edinburgh. And he was the man who, when he arrived down here, there weren't any courses. And he was a good golfer. He was actually twice a gold medalist at St Andrews. And I think was just kind of so disappointed that he couldn't play golf, and looked around and found this stretch of land and started to develop a golf course. And in his honor, that hole is now called Doctor. But it's a par three. It measures now, off the top of my head, it's about 180 yards. There's a slight valley just in front of it. And then you obviously got a raised green, elevated green, and it actually slopes where you've got the three bunkers on, the way I'm looking at it, my right-hand side, your left-hand side. It slopes away from there down to the single bunker on the left. And then you've got the four big pot bunkers in front of you as well. It's a tough green to hit and a tough green to hold. But it's one of our two signature holes. Everybody who plays it just kind of said, "Wow, that par three was something else."
Yeah.
But what's
the number of it? Is it?
It's number 3 as well, so it's fairly early in the round.
Yeah.
So you haven't really got a chance to get going, and suddenly you're confronted with this. And then we've got another one which is very late in the round, actually the 17th. Now that is actually aptly named because it's known as Snag, and it really can snag you up because it's
the 17th is on the Mackenzie course, right? That's your signature hole, as I understand it.
That's right. It's played on all the layouts that we play, both the Mackenzie and Doctor are played, so you don't miss either of those. And the snag hole, the 17th, you play from a slightly offset tee. It's offset by about 30-40 yards to the fairway. You've then got a relatively narrow fairway with lots of dunes left and right. No bunkers until you get probably about 30 yards short of the green. But then you play to an elevated green, which is actually a 2-level green, pear-shaped. And if the pin's on the front, then you've got a very, very narrow landing area. Yeah. And everything runs away either side into two bunkers to the right, 2 bunkers to the left, and that horrible rough behind it. So it's a really, really tough hole. And in fact, being so late in the round, you think you've got a good card going, and suddenly you get to the 17th and it can all fall apart.
Yeah. Well, I think what's fantastic about Seaton Carew is that connection to Alistair McKenzie, because they're, living here in Atlanta and having Augusta National 2.5 hours from where I live. Everyone here, every golf fan here is familiar with Alistair McKenzie. And it wasn't long after he worked on your course that he designed Augusta National. And so I'd love to see the similarities, right, in green complexes and angles and so forth. I'm sure that that there are some similarities, right? When you think about here in the States, the Johnny Appleseed of golf, it seems like back in the early 1900s was Donald Ross, who built countless courses. His signature are upturned greens, like the one behind me, right? That if your ball doesn't stop on the green, you're doomed. You could play ping pong going back and forth over the top of it. So I'm eager to actually play Seaton Carew and see what similarities there are.
Yeah, I think that's the great thing. We're actually, funnily enough, we're talking to a company called McKenzie and Ebert at the moment, who are very well-known course architects in this country. In fact, probably around the world now, because they've worked on a number of Open Championship courses. And we're looking at whether we even move back down to 18 holes, but actually looking at where are the best greens complexes. And they've said, that's one of the great things about Seaton Carew is the greens complexes that you've got. They're just superb. So what they're looking at is, let's not lose the greens complexes. Let's try and make the most of those, but probably come into one or two of them from a slightly different angle. So that's an ongoing project. But we're also working with, we're also working with them on the bunkering, because we about 2 years ago we took on a new course manager, and he came to us from Royal St George's, a chap called Tom Coulson, and Tom has actually looked at the course and said, I don't want to do a great deal to kind of change what you have, because what you have is absolutely fantastic. But what I want to do is to try to take it back closer to what McKenzie did. Right. Because over the years, it's almost 100 years. It was 1925 when McKenzie worked his magic. And he's saying, I don't want to lose that. I want to get us back closer to that. And so with the help of McKenzie and Ebert, we're looking at, how do we make our bunkering in particular more like the bunkering that you'd expect on a McKenzie course.
Yeah, I remember reading that. I read an article in a golf magazine that the writer did with you, and you were talking about Tom Coulson coming up to make those types of renovations. One recommendation would be on the bunkering to fill all of these in behind me, flatten the green out. No, I'm kidding. Well, one of the things, there's a course, I'm trying to remember which one it was. Royal Lytham and St. Anne's. Okay. And obviously that's another venerable old golf course, links course. And on 18, they left one of the bunkers as it was, 120 years ago or more. And it's not revetted. And then the top, it's got wispy, wiry grass. And as someone who loves those old golf courses, to walk by and see that, right, and think, holy cow, look at this thing. And also think, back then they didn't have rakes, right? So you would step into a bunker, into someone's footprint, and just phenomenal. It'll be interesting to see the work. When will Tom Coulson's work be complete?
Oh, gosh.
Or is it complete?
When he first arrived, he said that he thought it would be kind of probably a 10-year plan that he was working to.
Excellent.
He's already done remarkable work. I think there must be about 30 bunkers that he's worked on already, maybe more now. And you mentioned Royal Lytham and the fact that they've got a bunker there or bunkers there where you've actually got things like the marram grass going just on the top of it. That's something that Tom's already started to introduce on some of our bunkers. And he's put a new bunker in, and for example, on our fourth hole, just on the fairway, basically just on driving distance. So instead of actually just being able to blast the ball off the tee and then have a nice line into the green, you're now having to think, do I take that bunker on, or do I try and go right at it? But then I don't have as good an angle into the green as I would probably like. So it's trying to make people think the way around the course a bit more. But yeah, with all these things, it's a long-term plan. Most of the work we're doing in-house. So our team of greenkeepers during the winter tend to work on doing rebunkering or improving the faces and so on.
So let me ask this question. What course in England, other than Seaton Carew, of course, would you say is your favorite?
Oh, gosh. Now then, you've really put me on the spot there.
Or your favorite links course in general beyond Seaton Carew?
Yeah, I think for me, of the courses that I've played, the one that I think I really do love is actually Dornoch, purely and simply because it's just got such a spectacular view. The way it sweeps around the bay, and no matter where you are at Dornoch, you've virtually got a sea view. And I just think that's a lovely, lovely course. But funnily enough, there's one just a little bit further up the coast from there, much smaller, lot less known, called Brora. And I don't know if you've played Brora, but that to me is just magnificent. You've still got the wire fences around the greens to keep the sheep off. It's just so quirky and so lovely. And I can remember I played there a good few years ago now, and we played 18 holes in the morning. It was a glorious day. Came in, had a bite to eat, sat, had a drink, and then looked out and said, "Do you know what? It's a beautiful evening. Why don't we go out for another 9 holes?" Went out for 9 more holes, and as we were out on the course, looked over across the North Sea, and there was a pod of dolphins breaking through the water, and that was just magical. It's those sorts of moments that, to me, that's what makes golf. You don't get that in any other sport.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. I saw a pod of dolphins at a little course in Murrayshire called Hopeman. There's a little cove there, and there was a pod of dolphins. They get dolphins up at Portrose and Rosemarkie as well. But what I remember about Brora, I drove my ball, and it was just off the fairway, and some the grass was kind of wispy rough, and I couldn't find my ball there. And I go over, and my ball is underneath a scrap of wool that had somehow come off of a sheep, right? So I took a photo of it. I picked up the piece of wool, put it in my pocket, and it's in a scrapbook with a photo of my ball underneath of it. You're like, where on earth would you find a golf like in the States? They wouldn't allow but I've seen there's a course in Wales called Pennard that's got wild mustangs on the property. Aberdyfi, I've played amongst cows. I've played amongst sheep at Brora and other places. It's fantastic. I love that.
Yeah, I think that's the quirkiness of British golf. I think it's is it Brampton in the New Forest, where you've got New Forest ponies. Right. Once again, I can remember playing there and trying to shift a New Forest pony off the tee when it doesn't want to move is not easy.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, we have some quirky places.
So what course would you most like to play anywhere in the world?
Oh, it's got to be the one just down the road from you, I think. Everybody says at some stage you would love to play Augusta, and it just looks so magical. It's not something that'll ever happen for me, but I'm sure there are 1 or 2 lucky people in the world who've had that opportunity.
I'm not one of them. It's have you ever been to the Masters?
I haven't. No. It's once again, it would be a lovely experience, I'm sure. But from what I hear, tickets are not that easy to come by.
Correct. Correct. Living here, it's getting harder. When I first moved here 20 years ago, tickets you could buy what we call scalp tickets people on the side of the road selling tickets as you approach the gate. And so I've been there, I don't know, 15 times probably. And the thing that's so stunning about it, Roy, there's not a blade of grass out of place. I mean, I've heard that they cut around the bunkers with scissors to get them during the tournament. I'm sure they don't do that. And over here in some of those courses, they've got this system called sub-air that they run along the whole course, and they can kind of vacuum out moisture. They can pump in heat or cool, you know, to make sure that and on Masters Sunday, underneath the flower beds, they've got that same thing to pump in cold or warm so that it pops in bloom for TV on that Sunday of the Masters when everybody's watching from home. So it's a magical place. And I mean, one of the other things they do, Roy, is they sell sandwiches, right? And everything's very affordable. They don't gouge people on the prices. Sandwiches are like $1.50, right? So you're talking about, you know, £1.20 basically, right? And they come in green wrappers so that if you happen to drop it on TV, you won't see any trash on the ground. Not that but they've got people walking around in those white jumpsuits, you know, picking up trash throughout the day in case someone dropped something inadvertently. It's just the attention to detail there is just, you know, unreal, absolutely unreal.
Yep.
Is there anything left on your golf bucket list other than Augusta National, I guess?
Let me think. I've been very lucky, actually, to have played a lot of courses over the years, and particularly most of the Open Championship courses. I still haven't played the one in Northern Ireland, which recently held an Open, and I'm trying to remember the name of it now.
Port
Rush. Yeah, I haven't played Port Rush, so that's probably one. And also over in Ireland, I haven't played Ballybunion, which I've visited it and looked at it with envy, but still haven't actually managed to play it. So I suppose there are probably a couple that I'd love to play.
Yeah, I've played both of those, and they're fantastic. But again, you know, I would encourage you to look out the lesser known courses nearby those that are just amazing. Now, down around Ballybunion, it seems like all of those courses are fairly well known, but Northwest Ireland has some wonderful courses, like at Rossapena. They've got 3 now, including the new St. Patrick's Links, and near Royal County Down, they've got a place called Ardglass. It's an amazing little course, and yeah, that's fantastic. I forgot to ask you a question. I skipped over one. It just hit me. You know, when we bring visitors over to Seaton Carew, what can they expect from Seaton Carew as a club?
As a club, I mean, the main thing, as I say, apart from obviously having a fantastic golf course, and you know, I think everybody now that does visit us actually says, you know, it's a great golf course, and no wonder that's recognised as a championship links. It's the fact that we are an old traditional club, so we don't have one of these massive fancy clubhouses. It's a very cozy little clubhouse. We've got a captain's corner in the clubhouse where people are more than welcome to sit, but you'll actually see pictures of our past captains going back virtually to the very first captain. So that's something you won't see in other clubs. Okay. As I say, it's hopefully people will find it warm and welcoming. We don't have all the fancy things like people cleaning your shoes or cleaning your clubs, I'm afraid. Yeah. It's just a good traditional club. But it is something that it's probably unlike a lot of clubs you'll come across because of the fact that it is that old. So we don't have big modern plush clubhouse and stuff like that. But it's at the end of the day, I think people come both for the course and for the welcome.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because you just brought something to mind that I think is important. And we talked a little bit about this earlier, but when you go to a place like Dornoch, that's a championship golf course, right? I mean, I agree 100% with your assessment, and it's a remarkable place to play. But Seaton Carew is what I would call a members club. And that's what we want people to experience. See, what I didn't say earlier was the last thing I want to do when I go to Scotland or England or Ireland or Wales to play golf is to run into a busload of Americans where I hear American accents. I want to go to places where, like we talked, Southerners, Gossig, Silithon Solway, Seaton Carew, where you're not going to run into a busload of Americans, where you're not going to hear an American accent, and where, to your point, you feel like a member for a day, as opposed to being part of a big corporation where, they've got thousands of visitor rounds from the U.S. and, the prices are exorbitant and you don't get to play with locals, right? Or meet locals. You're talking to other Americans in the clubhouse, which is fine, I suppose, once on a trip. But for most of my trip, I want to be immersed in the local culture with local people and so on. So anyway, yeah.
I think that's, I mean, just to give you an example, hopefully, of how welcoming we are. Earlier this year, I try, whenever I've got a group, whether it's 2 people or whether it's 20 people, to get out around the clubhouse and meet them and welcome them and say hello. And on one particular day, there were 2 guys who had played their golf. I wandered around the clubhouse, went up to them, "Hi guys, have you had a good day?" And in broad Australian accents, they went, "Oh yeah, mate, it was absolutely fantastic out there." Sorry about the Australian accent. And we got chatting, and they said, "Actually, we're over here, we're visiting various courses, and one of the things we've been asked to do by our club is to see whether or not we can set up a reciprocal playing arrangement with some clubs in the UK." And they said, "Do you know what? This is such a fantastic course. It's a lovely, welcoming club. Do you think your committee would be interested in having a reciprocal playing arrangement with a club in Sydney?" And I kind of, yeah, I'm sure we would. We're not exactly going to get inundated with people every weekend coming over from Sydney. And so they went away, and I thought, nothing's probably going to happen about that. And lo and behold, a couple of weeks after, I got an email basically saying, "We've spoken to our committee here. They want to set up an arrangement with you. Is it still okay from your side?" And we've now actually got a reciprocal playing arrangement with them. It's a club called Pennant Hills in Sydney, which is a very well-established club. And they actually celebrate their centenary next year. And they have actually invited our club champion and our lady club champion to play in a competition, all expenses paid, in Sydney next year. So, it's amazing what comes of that sort of just trying to be sociable with people and try and make them feel welcome.
Right. Well, I mean, that's what you did with me, right? You reached out to me and here we are, right? And hopefully I'll be sending visitors, and other people that listen to this will be intrigued about getting to your part of the world and playing Seaton Carew. Now, Roy, I got one last question. And before we go, for someone visiting England to play links golf for the first time, what advice do you have for them?
I think the first thing is try to keep the ball relatively low. The one thing about links golf is the fact that I don't know a links course where the wind doesn't blow at some stage. It's
right.
very, very rare for you to have a calm day. So unlike golf in the States, or even if you go to parts of Europe, you're not playing kind of what I call target golf. You can't throw the ball in the air and it's going to stop within a couple of inches of where you put it. The ball tends to run, and if the wind blows, it doesn't fly in the direction that you necessarily expect it to.
Yeah.
So if you can learn before you come across just to have a slightly lower flight on the ball, that's probably the main thing. One of the first things I was told was hit with ease into the breeze. And that's the thing. Don't try and force it. Just let the club, let the ball do the work, and then you'll start to enjoy it. It's known as the running game. That's what links golf is about. It's trying to keep it as low to the ground as possible most of the time.
Yeah, that's great advice. I know before I come over every year, for a couple of weeks I go to the range and work on hitting knockdown shots, right? Like thinking, okay, 150 yards. If I would normally hit an 8-iron, I'm hitting a knockdown 6, trying to hit it, flight it down, and being able to control not only the trajectory but the distance as well. And the two answers that we most commonly get when we ask that question are flight the ball down or control your trajectory, and buy good waterproofs.
Yeah, certainly. You need a jumper or two. Let's put it that way, because even in midsummer, if the wind is blowing, it can be a bit chilly at times.
Yeah, that's true. Well, Roy, it's been a great pleasure having you on today. I really appreciate the time you invested with us today. We hope that all of our listeners are eager to come over and play Seaton Carew to the extent that I am, and hopefully I'll be able to come over and play sometime this year. But thank you very much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Okay, it's been a pleasure, and not only are we looking ahead to our 150th anniversary, we're also looking back at the wonderful history that we've got as a golf club. And I just hope that we can welcome some folks from the States to come and enjoy that as well.
Great. Thanks very much, Roy.
Thank you.